Hey everybody, it's the Classic Movie Gush tonight talking about a little bit of a different movie. We have our reasons, I think. We have some ideas of our reasons anyway for this 24th Gush. And the movie tonight is from 1967, Columbia Pictures piece called Who's Minding the Mint? Now, I'm guessing that about 10 or 20% of you probably thought, I know that movie.
Maybe less.
Maybe less, yeah. But as I've been reading reviews on the internet, IMDb and other places, the people who write about it, they're all giving it like 5 stars, and they just remember it so fondly. They love it so much. So we're going to take this different kind of movie for a couple of reasons. So, Melissa, what is this movie about?
This movie is about a guy that works at the U.S. Treasury, and so his job is to make money, and he accidentally takes home $50,000 without realizing it, and accidentally puts it down his garbage disposal. And because he's already under suspicion at the Treasury, there's a guy that doesn't like him and is always assuming that he's doing something wrong. He has to come up with a way to replace $50,000. And so he puts a plan in motion. He has this older guy who's retired that used to be a printer. They've come up with a plan to break into the Treasury through the sewer system and reprint the $50,000 just to replace it. Only at each step of the way, they keep realizing that they need more help. And so that they need a guy to get them into the sewer system. They need a guy to build them a boat so they can get through the sewer system. They need a guy who can crack a safe. The guy that needs to crack the safe is deaf, so they need a guy to give him a hearing aid. I mean, it's just like they end up with like 8 people by the end of it. And so that's the setup, and the whole movie is them putting their team together, figuring out how they're going to break in, and breaking in and printing this money. Oh, I should probably mention that the 8 people or whoever all decide that they want money. So by the end of it, they're printing like $8 million instead of $50,000, and everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. So that's the movie.
Yeah, very good. You know, we didn't lead with the big-time actors or the big-time director.
Right.
Although this movie certainly has names. It's an ensemble comedy, which, you know, ensemble casts, they can be successful, but actually, historically, they don't do so well. It's an interesting thing, the ensemble comedy at the box office. They don't tend to succeed too well. Even Monuments Men recently, which had this incredible cast, you know, it was almost like there were too many stars and there wasn't enough character development, not enough story development. So in its time, in 1967, when this film was made, it was like a who's who of the television world. The cast was in and out of guest starring on everything from, you know, Gilligan's Island to Alice and what were a couple of the other big ones. I think the one writer was one of the voices on the Flintstones, so they all wrote like scripts for the Flintstones and different things like this. And it's kind of like what a Saturday Night Live movie would be like in the 90s, where all the same faces are going to be in, just playing some kind of goofy random part. The story borderline doesn't matter.
Right.
Although I would say this, Who's Minding the Mint, the second half, it does pay off a lot of the setup. And there's one great twist that happens, and that is that Jim Hutton, who is the main character, who is the guy you said that works at the, he works for the U.S. Treasury. It's at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, where they make the money. He finds out a night before the big job that they're turning over the entire setup to automated setup the next day, so they have to go a night early, and that's the great scene where he calls the whole crew, and every single one of them in this fun succession is doing something completely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's really funny.
And I guess we should say who some of the people on this crew were. First off, I guess the main supporting character is Pop, played by our old friend Walter Brennan, who we talked about Rio Bravo. He played like the old prospector in all those movies. He was always that guy, or the old deputy, right? The guy that won the supporting actor award like 3 times in a row because extras used to vote on who got to win. So Walter Brennan always won.
He won a ton.
And this was a little bit later in his life. I'm not sure. He looked pretty spry in a lot of those scenes, though.
Yeah.
But then again, Rio Bravo was like 1965, I think.
He looks a lot older in Rio Bravo too, which is kind of funny. I mean,
He's got that
it's
limp. Didn't they call him Stumpy or something?
yeah, yeah. That's a good
Um,
movie.
Also, I guess the next most famous name could be Milton Berle. He plays the pawn shop,
Yeah.
real slimy salesman type person. Bob Denver from Gilligan's Island. Um, at that time, he was pretty much in his prime. So it's funny you said that Jim Hutton is 6'5",
Yep.
and there's one scene where he's standing next to Bob Denver, who doesn't even come up. His top of his head is not even over Jim Hutton's shoulder. And I should mention that there is a connection to Tim Hutton, isn't there?
Yes, that's son, right?
Yeah.
I think you told me that.
Do you know who Timothy Hutton is?
Well, only because you told me, I think.
I've been watching Leverage on Netflix, so he's kind of like the star of that show. It was really interesting in the opening shot. By the way, Who's Minding the Men has a really cool opening
Yeah.
tracking shot. They
It
kind of go
really.
around the whole thing, and they really did interact with millions of dollars to make this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then it kind of like comes down, and Hutton looks up, and it looks like Tim Hutton, his son.
Really?
Um, who Timothy Hutton is the youngest person to ever win the supporting actor award or something like that. He was like 20 years old, and he won an
Oh,
Oscar for Ordinary People. And,
wow.
and his dad, the star of this movie, Jim Hutton, died when he was like 45 years old. I was reading
Oh, it's
of
sad.
liver cancer, and so that was like a year and a half before Timothy Hutton won his Oscar.
Well,
And I suppose people who watched TV in the 70s would be familiar with Ellery Queen, which was one of those detective shows, and
mm-hmm.
I never watched Ellery Queen, even though I probably would like it.
I've never watched it.
You'd probably
Another,
like it too.
Jim Hutton, I like that he was basically being groomed to be the next Jimmy Stewart. And if you watch some of his movies, you can really tell that. Like, he was in Cary Grant's last movie. It's called Walk, Don't Run, and it's pretty fabulous. It actually takes place in like Japan or China or something, and they're at the Olympics. And but you can just tell the way they kind of have him walk and talk and act, and yeah, it would have been cool to see what he would have gone on to do.
Now, what did you think about the writing in this movie? Because it's a zany comedy. It would fit into the caper comedy. This was a few years after Ocean's 11. The original one had been done with the Rat Pack. And by the way, Joey Bishop is in this film.
Yep.
Jamie Farr has a small
Yep.
part. Who else did I leave out? Victor Buono, who was like kind of like a villain of the time, was in it. Jack Guilford, he's a real famous comedian. No one probably knows his name, but as soon as you see his face, you realize you've seen him in a bunch of things. He was the deaf safecracker.
I like him.
But what do you think of the storytelling and the writing as you revisit now?
Well, I have to preface it by saying I love this movie and I grew up watching it and I think it's really fun. But I don't think the writing is that fabulous, mostly because there's no subtlety in the whole movie. Like the dialogue is not that wonderful. I mean, there's some funny lines, but there's no layers to the dialogue. That's the thing. Everything's just very obvious. Oh, for instance, there's a moment at the end of the movie. I guess I didn't mention there's a love interest in the movie, and
Dorothy Provine.
Dorothy, and her name is Verna in the movie, and she has liked Harry forever, and agrees to help with this whole printing money thing just because she loves him. And they have the kind of conversation that seriously, like, if it was an episode of Full House, like, the serious music would have started playing because they're like,
Yes.
he's like, no, Verna, life is living in the moment and being carefree and now. And she's like, no, that's not what life is about. And it's just so, there's no layer to that dialogue. It's so obvious. And so that, I guess that's what I'd say about the writing. I totally,
Can I give you another one?
you can give me another one.
Early on in the movie, Pop has randomly showed up to follow our hero Harry home, and well, Harry does have a decent line. He basically says, "My philosophy is to eliminate the necessities and live for the luxuries," and he's like living month to month on credit. But there's this conversation. So these guys have obviously known each other for years, and Pop's like, one day I'm just working, and like he like gives the entire
Yeah, he does.
backstory of his existence in dialogue directly across to the guy who would have known it better than anybody.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's
it's just
a
really clunky. It's the kind of writing that gives you hope as a writer, because
yeah.
Stephen
You're
King
like,
said that, like, reading a bad novel can be the most inspiring thing you can do,
right,
and
right,
this isn't horrific writing, but it's like, oh, I could totally have done
right.
better kind of writing.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. They do. It's like just here's all the backstory in one paragraph for you. But so it's,
You nailed it though. It is like watching a TV episode
yeah.
in movie form. That's
Uh-huh.
exactly what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. But I still love it. Like I still need to throw out that I love it because it's funny and everything that could go wrong goes wrong. And I just remember watching it as a kid and being so stressed out and just like, oh, is he gonna get his money? Is he gonna get his money? Is he gonna get in trouble? And even okay, one of my favorite things about this, which I'm pretty sure I told you, was the opening music. And really, as I was watching it this time, I was like, it's got such a fun soundtrack. But anytime something happens in the movie that's like slightly a big deal, the music gives it away almost before it happens, which is really kind of funny to me too.
Like
Like,
circus music too.
yeah, it really is. I mean, it's funny music that could totally drive you crazy, but it's really fun. Like I just love it. But like right before he goes to put the money down the garbage disposal, the music freaks out. So like it's just there's just no subtlety, but I still like it.
It is memorable. In the 1960s, I was trying to think about some of the other comedies they were pumping out of Hollywood in the late 1960s. Um, have you ever watched How to Murder Your Wife with Jack Lemmon?
I believe I have. Yeah.
That one comes to mind, and it's, I mean, if anybody's thinking about what this looks like, you can almost like picture, even in The Odd Couple, like on television, there was always these wide, cosmopolitan establishing shots, and there would be these quick zooms, and
Hmm.
then everybody's wearing ugly clothes. It all feels the same. There's like a look to that era, and
Hmm.
along with
Yeah.
it, there's a comedic style that probably it made more sense than ever to have television writers make a movie.
Hmm.
And they went on to write different kind of episodic stuff for the rest of their careers. They didn't exactly have like a ton of film credits, although the
Hmm.
cinematographer, what's his name? I didn't write it down. It's oh, I forget it. Baroque, Joe Baroque. He worked on It's a Wonderful Life. He worked on
Really?
he worked with Capra in the
Oh,
40s, like as a young assistant DP, and
that's
then
cool.
he ended up doing stuff all the way till 1980 when he did one of my favorite comedies, Airplane. He did
Fun
the
movie.
original. He did The Longest Yard. So they actually had a really good cinematographer involved in this,
In a
which is
movie
just
that
kind of
nobody
like,
knows.
yeah,
That's
it's kind of
funny.
random. And that's what everybody kept saying, like, why don't people know this movie? All the people who are online, like, it's one of the funniest things ever. So let's talk about the payoff that I think really makes it so memorable. It has to do with what these characters are involved in when they get the call that they have to go rob a bank right now. So talk about that for a minute.
About what they were all doing when they get the call.
Yeah.
Well, okay, they're all doing something different. Like Verna is at ballet practice, so she's in a tutu, which makes it kind of hard when she needs to like slide under,
That's right.
under the I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Cat, the lasers,
Yeah,
the
lasers.
laser
Okay.
sensors. Catherine Zeta-Jones did it in Entrapment with Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Imagine if Catherine Zeta-Jones had been wearing pink tights and a tutu.
Yeah. So there's that. There's the guy that is going to get them into the sewer system, and he has hawked all of his furniture and stuff. He's one of my favorite characters.
Is that
He's
Joey
at a,
Bishop?
yeah, he's at a scout troop meeting, so he's in a what scouts wear. Milton Berle's character is in like George Washington outfit or something. I don't even know what he's
It,
supposed
it
to
was
be.
he's like, I'm at a lodge meeting, so he's
Yeah.
dressed up like George Washington.
The captain is just in his captain
Yeah,
outfit.
and they were setting up a very specific joke. I think probably a signature scene. And so most people, I would say everybody on the planet has probably seen this picture, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
The famous 1851 painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. It's used in almost like 4 commercials a year, and
Yeah,
it's
and
just it's
everything.
ubiquitous. And it's George Washington standing up on the boat, and everybody's hunkered down for this famous American Revolution moment. Well, in order to break into the Bureau of Engraving, they have to go underground. I mean, it looks so much like a soundstage. Again, it looks like a TV show.
Yeah, it really
Is
does.
all I can say. But they end up in all these crazy outfits positioned in a way that it's an exact recreation of what they had for this Washington crossing scene. And I gotta say, visually, it was definitely a good gag.
Hmm.
Even if the payoffs were predictable, they
And
did it well.
yeah, and they let it go on. I mean, they really give that shot its time on screen, so it's kind of fun. But
Did you get the sense when you watched this movie that it would have been a lot funnier in 1967 when you knew nuanced things about all these characters, these real people?
yeah, I do think so. I think, and I've actually thought that before as I was watching it. I bet there's inside stuff going on here that I don't even get because these aren't the actors I know. It's not the time period I know. I haven't seen a lot of shows from the 60s. So I bet for people at the time it was pretty, and probably I just think sometimes it's just fun to see a whole bunch of actors and actresses that you really like in one thing together, even if it's not the best movie or the best production ever, just to see them all there and to think they're having fun, you know?
I do, and it was set in Washington D.C. I mean,
Yeah.
it is total zany. I mean, there's a ridiculous for no reason they end up in like this high-speed chase away.
I know. There's no point to it.
There's plot
And they're-
inconsistencies that you don't even care about. Like they have to get out of the vault by 11 p.m. and by the time they surface, it's like the next morning.
I know that. Here, okay, let's talk about the biggest problem in the whole movie. I can
Okay.
handle everything else about this movie, but at the end, they get back to, I think they're at the pawn shop or something. They have a guy unloading the boxes outside, and he doesn't bring them inside. If I had $8 million, just leave them sitting outside. Why? That's the one thing I can't handle. Even
Mario will get
like,
them.
as a kid watching it, I remember being like, why don't they take the boxes inside? you know? But yeah.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, you're not watching Who's Minding the Mint to see the original screenplay of 1967. Let's just say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, or very smart characters. But
As the movie comes to its climax, said money is taken by the garbage bin.
yeah.
Because even after it was left outside, the guy who was responsible for it just decided to not look at it while it was loaded into an
I know.
Acme dump truck. And, of course, as all garbage is, it was taken to the wharf where it could be put on a boat to be dumped in the ocean.
Which also horrified me as a kid. I remember being a
All the
kid
garbage goes there.
like I remember asking my parents, "Does that really happen? Like, does all the trash go in the ocean? That seems wrong." But
The history side of me, I was trying to think of where America was in 1967. It was right on the brink of one of the worst years in history. It was still pre-Watergate, but that was kind of like a radical counterculture time. So I was trying to think, is there a statement here against the government? I think the only real statement is about like the value of money. It's like you can just print it and it doesn't hurt anybody, and there was probably something there. But it's not even like you can find a
No.
great social value in the
not really.
subtexts.
I mean, the biggest like moral or change is really the main character who goes from at the beginning not being willing to have dinner with somebody to at the end being willing to have dinner with somebody.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that's about it as far as like character change.
Okay, I will. I am willing to eat dinner with this attractive blonde who loves me.
And he, for really no reason, just automatically likes her now. But I guess if somebody helps you print $8 million.
It's kind of the fun thing where we have movies in the last decade like Anchorman, and I mean even The American Pie, which kind of was like a turn for like the kind of humor that was used in cinema, and a lot of the goofy stuff that is just like Will Ferrell-ish and out there. There's a lot of people of a certain generation who would just say that's all so stupid. And I just would point to some of the movies from the 60s and be like, you had films that were
Yeah.
just as ridiculous at that time as well. I
Yeah.
was thinking of Simon, the villain in What's Up Doc, played by Kenneth Mars.
Hmm.
I bet he was influenced by the captain in this one, Victor
It's
Buono.
very, it's very possible.
It was almost like the same character to me. I was like, wait a second, I wonder if he's just basically like using this character.
It could be. Now I want to watch What's a Dog. The captain has my favorite line in the whole movie, actually. I can't even remember why he says it, but he calls somebody a cheeky beggar. You cheeky beggar. I love that line.
It's so great. Like they're going through all of this cloak and dagger stuff, and then they end up just like completely wandering all around the security guards and
I know.
um,
It's really funny. Yeah,
so
there's
and there's
no
a
part.
revival truck. There's a
Yeah, there's a
revival
revival truck.
Jesus. Satan's what is it? Satan's gonna
Satan's waiting for you, sinners.
Satan's waiting for you, sinners, and
Yeah.
that's a part of it. But I don't know, worth a watch.
Hmm.
It's definitely interesting if you're looking for something from the late '60s. We don't cover that era. We always like revert back to the true golden age of Hollywood.
Hmm.
But we want to bring some movies from the late '60s, every once in a while. And this one was one of the first ones to come to your mind because
Hmm.
it's just like a goofy, fun
Random.
comedy.
And it's, you know what, it's fun, I think, to talk about movies sometimes that not everybody knows about.
Yeah,
So, yeah. And
yeah.
if you want a taste of the 60s and especially like the heist or caper genre, but you don't want to be watching a movie for like 4 hours, which is like one of the earlier ones, it's called like It's a Mad, 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 Mad,
Yeah, you said
Mad
this was
World
like
or
a
whatever.
this
Yeah.
was no, did you call it a trilogy or there was like a run
And
of
not
these?
not not really yeah, but just kind of a run of caper type movies. Like there was The Great Race, which actually this is kind of funny. Dorothy Provine, she was in both the Mad World one and Great Race, and then this one. So there's just kind of a string of them, but probably out of all of them, this is the lesser known one. But it's also the one that's not crazily long. So
Yeah, it is pretty
you gotta,
quick. I
yeah.
think 90 minutes was the runtime, 92
Hmm.
minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
So there it is. That's a little bit of a different take this week, but I'm curious. What kind of movies from the 1960s have people watched? I found myself looking through lists of movies that came out in each year of like 1964 through 1969, and there's so many titles I'm not even familiar with.
Hmm.
So, have you seen Who's Minding the Mint? Either way, what films are you familiar with from that era? I was thinking of
Like
the TV show
Sound
The
of
Wild
Music.
Wild West. Some of these folks were in that. That was like
Hmm.
I love that show, but that wasn't a movie in that era.
Right. Sound of Music came out in that era. Just saying.
Yeah, it did. Made a lot of money too.
That's true.
We should talk about other things about movies rather than just analyzing one movie.
What an idea that is.
We should make
That's
we should do something different with the Gush. Make a note. We're gonna get creative, okay?
okay, because we have not talked about this already.
What? We'll do 10 ways Sound of Music could have been better.
No.
We need more?
No.
Shorter?
You're just being mean now.